Hello and welcome back to the Roundup by News of the Week, the show where I, Jake Whitwell, summarise and explain the news, helping you to stay informed. This week, obviously, I've got my new toys out and a new angle, a better angle, hopefully, because you can sort of see me a little bit more. Yeah, I've done some work on the categories this week and will definitely 100% certainly include the sources in the descriptions of this episode, so you can fact check me if you wish. Other than that, let me know what you think about this episode in the comments, and please do like and subscribe. That would be great. Thank you. News on Labour policy. The Times covered the assisted dying bill, with experts warning that the amendments made to it are a slippery slope. 300 amendments have been made to, at the moment, and more are expected to come in the next few weeks. I'm not going to go over all 300 amendments because that would take years, and I don't have the time and you don't have the patience for me to do that. So we'll just go with the most significant one. One of the most significant amendments would see the removal of the stipulation for a High Court judge to sort of preside over whether you could get the assisted dying medication. This would be replaced in the amendment by a panel of experts, which include a senior legal figure, a psychiatrist, and a social worker for the approval. This is supposed to address the concern that there aren't enough judges to effectively deliver on the policy, which former Higher Court Judge Sir Nicholas Moyston, I think, called the policy unrealistic. And another amendment to the legislation would allow terminally ill patients with neurodivergent conditions who have 12 months to live to be able to access assisted dying. I'm not sure, that's actually not resting book. That's bad. Concerns remain over the viability of the bill, which I suppose is clear given the amount of amendments proposed, and also there are concerns that there would be too much pressure on medical practitioners and legal officials as well, even with the new amendments. The Telegraph reported Miliband has vowed to ban fracking permanently. In Labour's manifesto, they committed to a ban on fracking, and this week they recommitted to their manifesto, with Ed Miliband pledging to uphold a permanent ban. This is despite experts calling the gas which would be extracted by fracking an essential bridging fuel between the UK's use of fossil fuels and a future switch to renewable energy. Modelling by the Climate Change Committee, a climate watchdog, supported the idea that it was important. It predicted the UK will have a shortfall of 1 trillion cubic metres of gas between now and 2050, and the North Sea deposits can only provide 1/5 of this gap. Picton Resources, I think, discovered the gas supply in Gainsborough, which they have suggested could reduce the UK's reliance on foreign import. However, Miliband's commitment means these findings and their potential benefits would be disregarded in line with their manifesto, and concerns over the risk to the environment in the form of earth tremors. And companies like Greenpeace have supported this, and the historical implementation of fracking sort of supports this as well. Since last time when they tried it, there were concerns about earth tremors and the environment, which ultimately shut it down. However, the Shadow Energy Secretary, Andrew Bowie, has criticised Labour's stance, and so did Richard Tice, who also praised the discovery and called Labour's decision gross negligence. The Times noted ministers have been told to cut teacher numbers in order to boost cash available for social care. This story actually refers to Scotland, where the SNP have failed to meet their 2021 targets for recruitment of teachers, which would have seen an extra 3,500 teachers recruited. In reality, they've actually decreased by around 300. They are now 3,800 short of their 57,100 target, and they seem to have abandoned the target and replaced it with a new one, which would see levels of teachers rise to their pre-2023 levels of around 54,000. The IFS's latest report basically suggests that a greater number of teachers could reduce class sizes, but this actually wouldn't impact attainment too much, and so it would only have a modest impact. They said that if numbers were reduced, they were aligned with the pupil numbers, which would require cuts of around 12.5%, or in real terms 6,200 teachers. They could save £500 million a year by 2040 and would free up those resources to be able to be spent elsewhere on things like social care. However, Mike Corbett of the Teachers Union criticised the IFS's stance and said it failed to take into account that there's an increasing burden on teachers and that also there's an increasing volume of children with additional support needs in schools. And that concluded the news I got on Labour's policy. In news on foreign policy, though, the Telegraph detailed the EU is suing Britain in eight court cases despite the Brexit reset efforts. The Telegraph detailed 5 of the 8 court cases are relating to the Northern Ireland Protocol, part of which maintains the role of the EU judges, which gives them this jurisdiction. They involve the failure to sort of implement EU customs rules and on things like animal health and on pet travel. They're all at different stages of the legal process, but could end in fines as part of the Brexit deal. Also, Reuters noted Trump has agreed to meet Starmer in the next few weeks. Speaking in the Oval Office, Trump said he spoke to Starmer recently and said he will meet him in the next few weeks. There was no more detail given on that. Reuters also reported that Britain has announced new sanctions against Putin's allies. Sanctions have been placed on Putin's inner circle with particular focus on figures working within the Russian government. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said that these sanctions are in support of Ukraine's future and its sovereignty. The Standard detailed David Lammy has urged European nations to adopt sanctions against people in smuggling gangs. At the Munich Security Council, Lammy has reaffirmed his government's stance that European countries should work together to defeat people in smuggling gangs. This comes as Britain is set to hold roundtable discussions at the Munich Security Council after sanctions on people smugglers were instituted in the UK back in January. On Political React, BBC News noted 3 councillors have quit over the WhatsApp scandal. After last week, where an MP was suspended for his offensive messages that he put in a WhatsApp group chat shared with other MPs and councillors, the situation has developed, leading to further apologies and more departures. Burnley MP Oliver Ryan apologised over the comments he made in the group chat and also condemned the ones he saw from his fellow MP, which we covered at News of the Week last week. Thameside Labour said via a spokesperson that Claire Reid, Jack Naylor and George Newton decided to step away from their roles in the council and that an investigation was underway by the Labour Party. An independent councillor on Thameside Council said he made a hate crime report over the comments after constituents contacted him with concerns over the messages in the chat. Okay, sorry, I had to take a break in recording because my phone died. Whoops. My bad. Anyway, HuffPost detailed Labour's plan to deny small boat refugees citizenship has been labelled a dark moment in British history. The government has published new guidance which notes, as of the 10th of this month, those who enter the country, I wrote down without valid entry, and I probably meant without a valid visa. Those who enter the country without valid entry will be refused citizenship unless there's like an extenuating circumstance. A spokesperson for the Home Office said the guidance only strengthens existing legislation around the issue. However, the move seems to have sparked a split between Labour, with one MP saying it turned immigrants into second-class citizens. Also, a pressure group, Freedom from Torture, said the measure was a dark moment in British history and a step backwards. There seems to also be an argument over the rejection over whether the rejection of citizenship will mean that it stops people integrating and therefore adding to their communities and the economy, which would be unbeneficial not just for the illegal immigrant but also for the community, is the argument made by some. However, we know immigration has been a really significant issue in the UK recently, and you only need to look as far as electoral stats to see that. The Telegraph reported Starmer said claiming benefits was a lifestyle choice for some. This probably won't come as a shock to really anyone that's listening, but it was pretty much misrepresented by the Telegraph. He didn't actually really say it in those terms. Instead, he said he was writing about reforms to employment rights in an article for the Times, and specifically about why young people shouldn't just give up with trying to get employment and social mobility and things like that. and why they shouldn't just opt out of society. And he said, and Starmer said, the government would never tolerate worklessness as a lifestyle. Those are exactly his words. He said it goes against the fundamental ethos of the Labour Party, but he didn't ever suggest that it was solely a lifestyle choice in the way that the Telegraph represented. So yeah. In news on the economy, the Telegraph reported Rachel Reeves has launched an investigation into an OBR leak, and we actually covered this leak last week in Roundup over the downgrading of the growth forecast for the UK, which in theory spells uncertainty for the Labour government. Well, this wasn't supposed to come out until, officially and in the public, until the 26th of March. It happened in a conversation last week between Reeves and the relevant parties, but it wasn't supposed to come out in the media last week. The Permanent Secretary to the Treasury said that the investigation went on the way into the leak and that leaks are taken very, very seriously. Now let's look at some trends. The Times noted the Scottish universities have been starved of EU students since the Brexit vote. UCAS, to most of us, or the Universities College and Admissions Service, shows that there's been an 81% decrease in the numbers of EU students coming to work study in Scotland. Previously, Scotland attracted the most students and also sent the most students to and from the EU of any other country in the UK. And in this period of time since then, it's also the SNP have also ended a free university in Scotland for EU. Scotland's goal should be, in the end, to rejoin the EU in full. That is after they become an independent nation, in line with the SNP's wider goals. In global news, the Telegraph reported Denmark's zero-tolerance approach to refugee policy has driven down asylum seekers' asylum admittance to a record low. Denmark sits outside of the EU's scheme on asylum policy, and so it's been able to set strong policies with like the exclusion of Syrian refugees back in 2021 and in 2023. Or their anti-ghetto laws that they implemented in 2018, which restricted the number of non-Western people that were unable to settle in a certain place. Their policies this time round resulted in 860 people, only 860 people, being accepted last year, which is the lowest since 2020. The Telegraph also reported on Iranians chanting death to, I think it's Khamenei, I could be pronouncing that wrong, on the anniversary of the revolution in the country. As the Islamic Republic marked its 46th anniversary, the anti-regime protests took place across the country. Citizens took to rooftops and chanted death to the dictator. This is the result of economic hardship influenced by policy as well as international isolation and restrictions on freedom. In other news, the Times noted Elon Musk has denied a hostile takeover of the American government. In the press conference from the Oval Office with Trump, he defended the policies of Dodge. He defended his cost-cutting measures. He said the people voted for major government reform, and so in that way his role was totally democratic. Trump also defended the policies, and he said that the agency found corruption and fraud, and so on that basis it was also validated. Reuters detailed Germany has extended its temporary border controls. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said Germany has extended its temporary border controls for 6 months and that it had informed the EU of this decision. The strict controls were implemented as a stricter stance on immigration was taken more widely. And they mainly target EU nations in terms of asylum seekers coming from other EU nations. This comes less than 2 weeks before the election, with the AfD, the anti-immigration party, doing very well in the polls and sitting around 20%. So there is some speculation over why he has made this decision, but that is not for me to comment on here. Right, the Telegraph covered riots in Brussels over a delay to the retirement age. Tens of thousands of people marched in Brussels protesting against against the government's pension reforms, one of which will raise the retirement age. This increase would see the retirement age raised to 67 by 2030, after being raised to 66 this year. Other reforms also look to cut other areas of the public sector, like hospital funding or unemployment benefits, but these pension ones seem to be the biggest in these protests. Strikes are being followed by the protests are being followed by rail strikes that are which are protesting against some of the other measures. BBC News noted Ukraine has said Chernobyl's rate. Right, BBC News noted Ukraine said Chernobyl's radiation shield has been hit by a Russian drone. The drone strike caused a fire which was put out overnight. The UN's nuclear watchdog said that the levels inside and outside of Chernobyl were stable, but later the plant's chief engineer said that there was a risk of radioactive substances leaking. Russia denied the claims and said it does not attack Ukrainian nuclear infrastructure. And while the agency remains on high alert, the plant's chief engineer also said to Ukrainian state media that the situation was under control. In non-political news this week, the Wall Street Journal reported on a group led by Elon Musk has made a $97.4 billion bid for the control of OpenAI, the AI company who made ChatGPT. OpenAI is currently a non-profit, but there are plans to turn it into a for-profit company and spend $500 million on AI infrastructure. Musk's offer for the company he co-founded was a plea for the platform to return to the open source and likely remain a non-profit. Sam Altman, the current chief exec at OpenAI, rejected the offer and replied with a counter-offer for the purchase of X or Twitter of $9.74 billion. He also described the offer for OpenAI as a distraction and a tactic to weaken the good work they were doing in a Slack message to his employees. The Times noted Elon Musk, so sticking on Elon Musk this week, has objected to licensing laws which mean Starlink will not be made available in South Africa. Affirmative action policies there mean that prevent Musk from launching Starlink in the country of its birth, as they would require Musk to hand over 30% of the equity it made in the project to black-owned businesses, a policy which Musk is refusing personally. He's previously described it as openly racist. The Times also observed science has been ignored in a conspiracy theory which has spread over Arla milk. Arla, the dairy company, and supermarkets as well have been feeding cattle with, I can't pronounce this, OVR, which basically can reduce the emissions that come from cows, burps and farts. This has prompted many online to pour milk down the sink, making claims about health risks. This is a stance held by Reform UK MPs Richard Tice and Rupert Lowe, who are calling for a boycott to Arla. The use of the supplement has been approved by the FSA, the Food Standard Authority, and the chief executive has said that he was disappointed that science was not being followed in these cases. The Telegraph noted the Church of England has been accused of a punch in the gut to abuse victims. And the Church of England has voted to delay fully independent safeguarding measures which prior abuse victims were in favour of. Victims have called for the government to intervene and stop the amendment, while bishops have said they're looking for a practical and legal solution to the issue. Sky News observed Nigel Farage is exploring a criminal claim over his NatWest debanking. Mr Farage is reportedly asked his lawyers to explore whether or not there are criminal grounds for a lawsuit against NatWest, and he reportedly said he has unfinished business with the bank. The Times detailed work from home parents. Times detailed Ofsted said, I don't even care. I don't even give a shit. In other news, the Telegraph observed a British ICC prosecutor has been banned from the USA. Well, do you remember last week when we covered Trump's sanctions against ICC staff on the roundup? Well, this is the fallout from that. Sanctions have been brought against one British man who is a prosecutor on the ICC, and that's the only person prosecuted so far. His name is Karim Khan. He is the only one, so his wife and children are also affected, and this will result in travel restrictions and also any property he has in the USA being seized. The Telegraph also reported Kemi Badenoch has tried to stop Rayner from cancelling local elections. Badenoch has tabled a motion that would stop, which would see the election delaying being annulled after Rayner cancelled all delayed elections from up to 5.5 million people across the country. There are concerns that the election delays are not needed and that the policy has been rushed, and this is both due to the time that will be taken to implement the changes that it's being delayed for, and also due to the lack of consultancy of local people around these changes. Rayner defended her actions and said that she only signed off on the measures of councils who requested to be reorganised, but again, this does not equate to well, there would be questions over whether this equates to real consultation and consent with the voters. The Times reported Reform's voter base has said it is not a protest vote. And hold on, I know some of you won't like this, it's just the headline again. But they really said that, so data from the British election study, the BES, showed that 1.67 million of Reform's voters, which is around 40% of their voters, identified with Reform and its values. Polling expert John Curtis said it wasn't a protest vote, and instead the party are drawing on Brexiteers and people who are unhappy with the government and opposition, which is around 40% of the vote. He also noted that if the government managed to turn the economy around and improve things like the NHS, this 30% would be made less, and that voters would sort of have more trust and therefore switch. The Independent reported Badenoch has fell behind Starmer and Farage in a new poll. A poll by Techne UK, which is a weekly poll, showed Badenoch falling further behind Reform UK, with them at 22% in the popularity ratings, with Reform UK on 25 and then Labour just ahead on 26. Techne UK surveyed 1,637 voters, and I didn't think that was that many. But it suggested, but they also suggested that 26% of those who voted Tory at the time of the election in July would have now switched to Reform if they had an election again. Again, it's not very representative, so it's kind of a small sample size, but they're the polling figures that we can work with. BBC News noted MPs have called for an end to booing and jeering in the House of Commons to make debates more accessible. The committee recommended this, also recommended that antiquated jargon and gendered should also be scrapped. The titles should also be scrapped. These suggestions were made as part of a cross-party committee, which has been tasked with reviewing the second job situation and also the parliamentary codes of conduct. There are claims that the debate would be more serious if they removed some of these heckles. And that it should set an example, and as a legislative building, it should set an example and be able to hold better scrutiny. Okay, I believe my tripod has just given up on me, which is great. I've had those technical issues with it today. I will have to look into fixing it for next week. But anyway, that's all the news I collected. I thank you very much for bearing with me and bearing with the late upload despite all of these issues. Please like and subscribe, and I hope that you found this informative and maybe also entertaining with all of the things that went wrong. Have a good week. Bye.